It's a nice place to have the conference, so thank you very much for that. And well, let me tell you a bit about Chile, specifically about Corfo, which is the development public agency, and a bit also about my job within Corfo. In Corfo, I work in the entrepreneurship unit, which does many things. One of them is Startup Chile. I don't know if you've heard about that program. And I'm specifically in charge of the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So I'd really like about some numbers related to Chile. I would need another circle to put how many earthquakes we have had so far. I don't know if you heard that there was a big one yesterday. But we are about 70 million people. Close to 7 million people are in Santiago, the capital city. It's a very centralized and concentrated country. We are at $22,000 per capita. And we are number one in the region on Human Development Index, reporting nationwide. But we also have another side of the coin. We are number one in the OECD for inequality. Okay? 81% of the people live with less than $400 per month. 1% of the population gets incomes, country income. So we have like 5 or 8 very, very rich families in Chile. And we have 7.8 percentage of poverty. Okay? So this is kind of the gap that we want to address with innovation and entrepreneurship. I'll be talking a bit about Corfo. It's handled by Corporación de Fomento de la Producción. Okay? And it was born in 1939 after an earthquake. In January 39, actually it was born Corfo 3 months after the earthquake. A moment when there was also a world economic crisis, and well, then this earthquake came up, and the government at that time, President Videla, he said, well, let's create this agency that will be in charge of developing this country, industrializing it, etc. So they created Corfo. And actually, as I said in the slide, Corfo was born as a way to stimulate industrialization, growth, and import substitution in 1939, as I said. Corfo is one of the responsible of the creation of very big companies in Chile, public companies, in the 70s where they were privatized. And also Corfo was behind the support of big private companies for making them grow, so they can hire more people and get more employment in the country. So Corfo was behind the creation of big companies in electric power stations, refineries, wood pool, etc. A lot of big companies and new industries. But the world has kind of changed. So since this 1 year and a half in the current government, we've been pivoting our mission towards more entrepreneurship and innovation, not just competitiveness, and development in the traditional way of thinking. So we know this for a long time ago, but we are trying to do some stuff to overcome it, which we cannot depend on natural resources anymore. Okay, if you've seen the price of the copper is going down, we have very big problems with Codelco, which is the copper company. And well, nowadays the economy is not that it's bad, but it's not doing quite well today. So we need a lot of changes. And productivity is, we are not characterized by a high rate of productivity in the country. So we need to go towards innovations, entrepreneurship, and growth formally. So Corfo represented this question: how to pivot towards a more diversified, innovative, and knowledge-based economy. That's the main point. Maybe I think a lot of states have, put this question in place, and we're doing some things to get on board these new challenges. So what's Corfo's new mission? It's like the prior one, but a bit bigger with in focus on diversification of its production, transformation of the industry, give employment opportunities, and by everything by promoting investment, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So Corfo has 4 or 5 business units. Let me explain a bit how we work. Corfo has like 1,000 employees all over the country. We have offices in all the regions in Chile, and of course the headquarters are in Santiago, like everything in Chile, most of things. And we have different business units. One is competitive development that you see in the slide. So this is saying which industries, new one or traditional ones, will face or will get on board of these new challenges. Actually, for example, we are thinking of mining, but virtuous mining or smart mining. And mining is very traditional. We are thinking of agricultural stuff, but all food, sophisticated traditional industries. But we're also thinking of solar energy. That the country has some advantage on them, but we haven't developed the capabilities yet. So it's a mix of sophisticated traditional industries, but creating new ones where we have some competitive advantage. Okay? The second business unit has to do with the development of technological capabilities. So one of the things that this unit is doing is, for example, installing in Chile R&D centers. They've installed so far 10 to 11 R&D centers. We call it centers of excellence. For example, Fraunhofer from Germany, UC Davis from the States, and many others with a grant like $10 million for 8 to 10 years, and we expect them to transfer some knowledge to the country. Okay? And many other things that this unit is doing. Then we have a kind of traditional unit within Corfo, which is in charge of investment and financing for human capital, for companies, matching fund like of subsidies, which is this is like a transversal unit for all the other units that I'm explaining. So then during the dictatorship, Corfo was mainly working on this. It was like a sort of a bank, So we've been changing that at least for already. Then we have the whole unit innovation. Its main focus is big corporations and SMEs. I would say that nowadays more. So we have different subsidies for innovation management consulting. We use those companies, association or network for different SMEs, prototyping, technological packaging, and also companies that finally, where I work is the entrepreneurship, which is mainly in charge of promoting dynamic integration. And we are kind of well known in some part because of Startup Chile, which is a public incubator that you may have heard about it. And I will explain a bit. So let's talk about the entrepreneurship department. Our main goal is, well, we are about 20 people connected and coordinated with other people along the country. So there's a head, the CEO, there's two directors, I'm one of them, I'm specifically in charge of entrepreneurship ecosystem, and the other one is in charge of early financing. So that's the guy that gives money to entrepreneurs, and I'm the guy that gives money to incubators, accelerators, co-working spaces, engineers, and a lot of stuff that I'm going to explain. So we're very much in the business of what is called now dynamic entrepreneurship, which is basically high potential startup, not traditional or self-employment activities. And how we do this? And this is more or less the way that Corfo works in general. We co-finance support for different actors. And it's not always like this, but in general, it's like 80% Corfo and 20% the private, the entrepreneur, the incubator, whatever. It's a not reimbursable funding, so we don't ask for the money back, which is something for private agencies. Okay. The history in short of what we've been doing is as follows. This whole unit of entrepreneurship came out from the innovation department in 2005. Okay, and Corfo was working in innovation, formally making policies. I would say since 1999 or 2000, more than that. But then entrepreneurship has become increasingly important, so they are specifically to be in charge of that. So between 2005 and 2010, we mainly created or supported two specific actors in the country. One is were the incubators. We still support. We either create some incubators managed by private guys, or we support the ones that were, working already, but didn't have any money from the state. And also with capital to entrepreneurs. In 2010, there was in the previous government, so more towards the right side of the previous government, they started with the startup team, which has been quite successful. A lot of, I would say, press, media. And it's a quite interesting program that we've been, pushing forward because we believe it's a great program. And I will explain a bit about it. And then we also in 2010 created another subsidy called SAF line. SAF because it's Subsidio Semilla de Asignación Flexible. So long name, so we call it SAF. So it was to improve the money that we give to to survey the money that we give to entrepreneurs. And finally, what we're doing in 2014, I will speak a little, is lots of things. I would say that this year we are kind of finishing installing the actors that we think should be in place to have a proper entrepreneurship ecosystem. Okay? We'll show you there are a lot of actors, and as you can think, we have a lot of subsidies. Some people some countries that are about to create an agency, like a public agency in charge of development, go to Chile to see what we're doing because we've tested every subsidy, every possible subsidy in the world. It's a bit crazy, but we think we are in the right track. And now I will talk about ecosystem actors and also what I mean by going territorial. Well, this is a graph just to show you that the budget is being increasing, and we, the government and the state, are in a way measured, you like it or not, by the execution of the budget. And we've been executing it very well. And nowadays we have for this year $44 million that we mainly give through subsidies. We put in place through subsidies. And it's growing, this budget. Pre-seed funding, this is a 2-year-old slide, but it shows the money in pesos that we've given to different entrepreneurs regarding the territory where they are. You know, these are the regions in Chile, there are 15 regions, and as you can see, it is highly concentrated in Santiago, in Región Metropolitana, which is the Santiago. Okay? So we are also working on that, and that's why I told you we are monitoring Togo. We know that we are doing many things in Santiago. It's a kind of good ecosystem. We've been in some rankings, etc. But what happened in the south, in the north, is not that good. My job is usually going towards the south and the north, making diagnosis and actually co-creating the policy on entrepreneurship with the local agents. And regarding the incubators, which was also one of the first policy, we've made this work in progress with this infographic. We have 17 incubators in Chile. If you see, if there's, I guess this is, okay. If you see, most of them are in Santiago, which is there. Some are in the north, the mining region, Antofagasta. We don't have any, where was the earthquake district? And we have the south, some others, but they are highly concentrated here. And actually, we are working very much in something that we think we haven't done very well at this time, which is getting the numbers. You know? So you cannot see that that's the number for 2014. How many companies, how many startups do each of them have? What's the money, the price money they have raised, and actually what's the amount of the sales they have. So 17 incubators, 212 startups in the year 2014, $29 million in sales, $7 million private capital funds, which is quite few. We have a problem with private capital, venture capital, engineering, etc. Startup Chile. I have just, I think, 4 minutes left, so I'll speed up in the presentation. We get $40,000 for a team for 6 months, and they live in Chile, equity free. This is like a gift, you know. We just ask them to kind of spread the knowledge in the country. So the hypothesis behind Startup Chile was we will bring entrepreneurs from foreign countries, and they will kind of contagious. This is probably English word, but they will, spread this entrepreneurial culture in the country. And it has happened, but I would say in Santiago. So we are going regional with Startup Chile. They have a specific place in Santiago, a nice place. They have talks. They have a working space as well in a Telefonica place. We have had in 4 or 5 years 10,000 applications. We've had 1,000 startups. 10 investment for total $1 million of this in Chile have stayed in Chile after the program. We need to increase that. The other ones just came out. Sales in 2015 went up to 28 million of the companies the startup are in Startup Chile in 2015, which is 4.6 times the investment, of course, for any Startup Chile in 2015. And they have given a quite amount of employees. Now we are going with different other programs connected to Startup Chile. For example, the S Factor is a pre-accelerator for women. It's a kind of unbalanced, there is an unbalanced, equilibrium in women and men in Startup Chile. So we are doing this. It's $15,000 for 12 weeks, training, mentorship, connected to a global community. Also, we've created another program connected to Startup Chile. We call it Scale Up. It's after the $40,000. They can get a small part of them can get $120,000, so they can stay at home in Chile and keep on giving some value to the economy. So that's Startup Chile. So are we doing it well? We think we're doing well, but we lack numbers. That's the important thing, measurement. And now we know that we go from subsidy way of thinking to more ecosystem way of thinking. So we're supporting creating new actors. I will show you the next slide. Co-creating agreements with local governments, connected with local needs, and managing the ecosystem. So these are the actors of the ecosystem. We have nowadays 17 incubators, 7 accelerators in specific sectors like mining, agriculture, etc. 5 mentors networks, 3 angels networks, 12 university company tournaments, 26 co-work spaces for global hubs, seed for new industries like biotech or educational technology and others, gender and approach projects, international alliances, seed for research centers on the entrepreneurship ecosystem and the like. And about this year, 60 projects supporting events in meetups, education, entrepreneurship, and demo days. The actors with that sign are the actors we just have been implementing this year. We kind of double the size of the actors just in this year. And these are subsidies that the idea is that we generally put in place new actors with these subsidies. And what we're doing now, among other things, we are trying to identify the whole ecosystem through different platforms. So everyone in Chile, if you want to become an entrepreneur, knows who to contact with, And now knows if there's someone. This is I think this is Valparaiso, now this is Santiago, if someone close to where they live is working on entrepreneurship. So we're democratizing the access to entrepreneurship innovation. That's actually one of our main policies or our main drivers, democratizing the access to entrepreneurship and innovation opportunities. And we are working with this platform, which is free, it's online. It is growing interest in the visibility of the information. We just put the subsidies and we realized some people didn't know these actors. And I'm finishing. This is the startup journey, the typical curve with all the subsidies that we are putting in place. These are private actors. They have the grants. Some are universities, some are NGOs, some are consulting companies. And finally, what are the challenges ahead? Impact indicators, measurements, like in that. To manage the ecosystem, articulate different actors, make the connection between network entrepreneurs, or mentor networks and incubators, or accelerator, entrepreneurs and co-working spaces, etc. Get more entrepreneurs on board. Hopefully, we haven't got any IPO or stuff like that, or just a few. Also, just a few. Take Startup Chile to regions and increase retention in Chile of those entrepreneurs. And more VCs, more angels. There's a lack in the financing chain for the entrepreneurs in Chile. We have people with money, but traditional and more rent-oriented people. So finally, what we are doing with the policy, for example, with the co-working space policy, we are putting money, co-financing spaces like this, factories that are, abandoned, to make them become places like this. These are real pictures of things we've been doing. So with vibrant community of entrepreneurs, getting connected, and creating companies,
We have to keep it a bit short, but anyway, please.
A very quick question on my side. Startup Chile is very well known and sort of has adopted an Anglo-Saxon American Silicon Valley approach to entrepreneurship, which basically is let's get business angels, venture capital, which means serial entrepreneurs. Don't you feel that this could be at odds with the traditional entrepreneurship approach that we have in many Latin countries, which basically is I make a company because I want to grow it, and I want to keep it in the family, and so on, which has been successful after all.
Great. I mean, I haven't talked about the whole innovation system that we have in place in Chile. And actually, there are some other public agencies which are specifically in charge of, I would say, traditional, which are also growing in number, and they also give value to the economy. But specifically, there was a specific direction, orientation, and cultural to getting more involved with dynamic integration.
I have one quick question.
Okay.
Can you estimate, the number of working places that were created through your program?
The workspaces?
No, number of working places. How many people were employed and are still employed by these startups or the company?
Yeah, that's hard to say, but I think that we can say between Startup Chile, the Seeds Capital, another, don't know, it's about 3,000 or 4,000. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions?
Thank you very much.
So, we have been running across the world, and there's an area that's kind of the best. That's the Far East. So it's my honor to go to Professor Philippines to give us an overview about the state of the innovation in the Far East.
Good morning. I am standing, not sitting. You might not see me. First of all, I would like to stress that I am not a real expert of innovation, even if I have read quite a lot of Schumpeter works. I simply am a bit less ignorant than many of you about East Asia, and this is why I think I am speaking about East Asia. And I would like to start with a few general introductory comments. First of all, don't think that East Asia is homogeneous. Maybe they are a bit yellow, the eyes are a bit strange, not common to us, but you have completely different problems, societies, way of thinking, and so on. Think, for example, Thailand and Malaysia. Malaysia is a Muslim country, and is a Buddhist country. And Thailand dating back maybe to even the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, are usually a closer community. In Thailand, on the contrary, you cannot tell which is Thai ethnic and which is Chinese ethnic. And I repeat, religion, habit, history. Thailand with Japan is the two only countries in the world that has been never colonized. You can add, if you like, Ethiopia has been colonized only 5 years, but Thailand, all the other countries has been colonized. And the governance. Some common aspects are given by the Japanese FBIs that since late 70s, 1980s and so on, spread the Japanese way of production of corporate governance, and and I repeat, the overseas Chinese. The overseas Chinese are actually the master of the economies in all these countries. In Indonesia, overseas Chinese are simply 2–3% of the population, but they own some 80% of the economy. Usually you have a chairman, a president that is Indonesian, and you have a CEO that is Chinese and is the real man commanding the business. One more aspect, Confucianism. And you know very well, I am sure that harmony, losing the face, is the most important object, and is the most important ethic rule. You must behave not to make it all harmony. And you have very clearly and carefully observed the hierarchical personal relations. There are 5 different relations, but even if Confucianism is spread between all overseas Chinese communities, you have a different trend of Confucianism. For example, very simply, in China, you could kill the emperor. In Japan, that is forbidden. Don't think to kill the emperor in Japan. That would be behaving very badly. These hierarchical relations are the explanation given by some experts. It's not my idea at all, but a lot of people are saying that in East Asia they are very good at large-scale manufacturing, simply because they give, let us say, inverted comma, they obey to orders. So in large-scale manufacturing, that is better, are not at all good at finance and even at innovation, in which you need an individual personality. You need, if you like, to break the rules, not to follow the rules. At the same time, they have a very good educational system. All, you say, in all East Asian countries, education level are very good, and they are quite strong in maths. For example, I understand that some 80% of PhD students in American universities in physics and mathematics are either Chinese or coming from East Asian countries like Korea and so on. You have an increasing amount of R&D expenditure, and mainly that is a big difference between East Asia and Europe, and even more in the United States. Mainly is private funded. I have put a but because the boundary between private and public is very difficult to define. Singapore is, if you like, a capitalistic society, capitalistic economy. But if you do anything and you do not inform the government, or better, you don't inform the PAP, the People Action Party. PAP has been governing Singapore since the independence in 1965, and last Friday, September the 11th, they won the general election with 70% of the votes. And you can imagine what it means to be a private firm, a private corporation in Singapore. And I repeat, the idea of harmony given by Confucian beliefs means that everything is one thing. You cannot divide, I repeat, private and public. They are part of one world. Actually, you cannot divide even, let us say, supernatural things from natural things. There is one unit. And one the result of this is that research is focused on ICT, Mallets on knowledge-intensive sector like pharma, computing, and so on. And they are producing, especially China, a lot of patents. China is becoming the most innovative as far as the number of patents is concerned, the most innovative country in the world, just a second to the United States. But apparently, many of these patents are, let us say, almost worthless. They generate rather low value added. And now, a few flash, a few information about China, about Japan, and about South Korea. Innovation policy in Japan, from the beginning of the new reforms by Deng Xiaoping in 1978, has been very clever, meaning that all FDIs, all foreign corporations investing in China, had to bring the last technique, the up-to-date technique. Usually, you know very well, multinational corporation going in a developing country, and China in 1978 was really underdeveloped, not simply developing, but underdeveloped. Multinational corporation bring the last left technique, not of course the most modern one. China, on the contrary, has been asking all corporations if they wanted to invest in China to bring the most up-to-date technique. Actually, with many Japanese corporations, they were to a certain extent, even I would say, if I am allowed to use the word, blackmailed. Not only the up-to-date technique, but the future technique, meaning the technique not even used in Japan. And this has been, I would say, the innovation policy during the later 70s, 80s, I would say 90s, and to a certain extent even now. But the so-called fifth generation leadership, the new Secretary Xi, now would like to generate domestically innovation, and is one of the ways we know to avoid some sort of the so-called middle class trap, meaning a slowdown, a permanent slowdown. China, we know very well, has been slowing down from 10% a year. GDP growth rate has been for 35 years, 10%, and mathematically prone. You know that at 10% every 7 years you double your valuables, and 35 is 5 times 7, and so it's been 5 times a doubling, and you can calculate 10, 1, 20, 40, and so on as you like. The bigger problem, and I am simply quoting a subtitle in the last issue of The Economist, that a special report dedicated to business in China. Why has China not produced a world-class car yet? They are copying cars. We know very well that the car industry, to a certain extent, is a mature industry, not a very innovative, if you don't take into account electronics, of course, or electric cars, but that is a bigger problem. Going back to Confucianism, to hierarchy, is China good only at manufacturing and not at finance or innovation? And the state-owned enterprises are the bulk of course, employment, not value added, not at all value added. The vast part of value added is now produced by private firms or foreign-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises still have a lot of political clout and a lot of political connection, and rely on monopoly rates. In in a previous talk, one of the speakers stressed the danger of rent-seeking, and apparently is what state-owned enterprise in China doing it, so they are delaying innovation. Actually, they are even internally poor integrated. By the way, you might know that some state-owned enterprise have 1 million employees. They are not large, I would say they are quite large firms with such a number of employees. And even more, they are rather bad at marketing. This might be a problem because these firms, of course, are producing mainly for the local, for the domestic, for the internal market, and not mainly for the foreign market. They are maybe producing a lot of parts, of course, we know very well that China is a world factory, but they are not very good at producing products that can be sold. And this is another point that a speaker before myself already stressed. About Japan, Japan is always improving. And this is not about manufacturing, about innovation. It's about, if you like, history. It's about the character. Japan has been always number 2 with respect to China. The Japanese kanji, the Japanese characters are a derivation, of course, with the change. Japan never copy. Japan adapt a foreign idea. So Japanese kanji are different from Chinese kanji, but they are derived. Religion, every kind of philosophy, a lot of characters of the Japanese society has been derived from China. So Japan always has been number 2, and even more, it's not only number 2, but it's nature that's been, I would say, quite hostile to Japan. And we know very well what has been happening even in the very recent past. So Kaizen is the byword, is a commandment, if you like, for all Japanese, not only people, but also firms. And in addition, the Japanese economy is a very competitive economy because you have many keiretsu, and in each keiretsu you have firms producing almost any good. So they are in fierce competition. It's very competitive economy, but in a setup, in a framing, if you like, almost uncertainty-free, because they have the 5-year plans, they have the economic planning agency, and the typical way to take a decision is a so-called free-legs tool, meaning bureaucracy, and they are the most important component, entrepreneur, and politicians. Politicians have a very low valuability, very low relevance in Japan. Second aspect I would like to stress is the role of incremental innovation. We know very well the Toyota way, the just-in-time, lean production, and so on, zero defect, and so on. And Japan has a lot, is the highest, I understand, percentage over GDP of investment in R&D, and if not all, the largest part is privately funded, but apparently with a rather poor result. Apparently all this money put in R&D has a very marginal productivity, and apparently the explanation for this are poor internationalization, poor university business synergies. Professors in Japan don't like to be mixed in corporation, professor, and low venture capital investment. In addition, SMEs have a lot really. To be an SMEs in Japan is like being in heaven. They receive a lot of fund support and so on. But one of the byproducts of this support is that if you are an inefficient SME, you can survive because the government and public policy will help you to sort out your problem. So we have a lot of old SMEs and inefficient SMEs. And I think I have taken almost my time. I just show you about South Korea. As we have seen in the previous slide, South Korea is leading in the I can show you for 10 seconds the last slide. These are, on the contrary, the big defect of Korea. I am sorry to have been so quick, but it would mean every minute some 120 million people living in East Asia. So I have tried.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you have questions to Professor. So please ask short questions now, then for the extended questions we go to the panel discussion.
Better no questions, so I am not embarrassed not to be able to answer all.
Very short, anything about
North Korea, apparently they are rather good in some aspect of science and technology. We know very well the missiles, we know very well the nuclear power. About the rest, apparently they are very, very backwards. You might know that in 1950, North Korea was the rich part because it had mining and so on. And South Korea was the poor part. And South Korea in 1950 had less graduates than Argentina and less than many African countries. But South Korea has been able to develop what I think is one of the most important inputs, human capital. And by the way, I would like to stress that, in my opinion, comparative advantage is not given by nature or by God. I mean, the real inputs are not land or minerals or whatever you like, but you can build up new inputs, and human capital is one. And Korea South is one of the examples. I repeat, in 1954, now they are top, and we have seen that even in innovation they are good. Apparently, North Korea, just to close very, very quickly, is surviving because China would like to have some sort of buffer state between South and, if you like, Japan plus United States. And in addition, North Korea acts as a very good lever in international politics, international security, because North Korean politicians and governors are very, very, very good. They are not crazy people. They are very, very good at poker players. They arrive at the brink, receive a lot of efforts. I mean, the famine 10 years ago was overcome by rice given by South Korea. Just threatening, North Korea threatened to use missile and nuclear power and so on.
Thank you. I have one very, very quick question. I have an extended one, but I keep it for myself. So the quick question, again by numbers.
Yeah.
Do you have an estimate of the fraction of the high-level educated Chinese students in the US or abroad that come back to China?
Well, rather few are coming back. I think not more than 20-30%, even if the Chinese government is trying to bring back not only graduates, but also firms. The Chinese government set up a conference of Chinese entrepreneurs abroad, rival to the Singaporean-based one already existing. And the secretary has told a conference that they must fill Chinese first. And that is a bit embarrassing because many of them are British or American or, I mean, are citizens, and asking them to be Chinese first is a big problem.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
So, it took us a little bit longer, but okay, we managed to finish session 1, so I hand over to Lori, who is going to chair the session 2. We'll go quickly, and then we go straight to the final discussion. Please talk.
Okay, so now we pass to session 2, that is devoted to more to the relation, not the relationship, but the role played by the state, the public sector versus the private sector in fostering innovation. And in the first part, we have 4 economists, and then we will have the round table with the previous speakers and some other speakers that will be added. And the economists now will try to give us the theoretical background that is needed to understand them. And the first speaker is Cecilia Fernandez from ISTAT.
Sorry, this is innovation, of course. I study
Innovation.
Innovation in action. But
Little bit of suspense.
okay, so thank you so much for inviting me. So I wish to thank you, Lorenza and Massimo, for this invitation. And sorry for the rearranging of the presentation, but I have to take a train at 6 o'clock. Well, my presentation will be a little bit different from what you have seen so far, since the purpose of this presentation is to show you some ongoing work in a project that has been financed by the European Commission. And the project is essentially attempting to measuring intangible capital, which in a minute I'm going to define, which is essentially investment in innovation in the public sector. And the purpose of the project is to measure intangible investment in the public sector, and then to evaluate what can be the role of intangible capital in the public sector to foster innovation in the total economy. So it's a huge project, as you can see, as you will see. The work that I'm going to present to you today is a joint work with Carol Corrado from the Conference Board and Jonathan Astor from the Imperial College and Silvia Meloni from ISTAT and Lewis. So, So before starting to define what intangible capital is, I wanted to start from these quotes from Barry Wagner, which he gave in May 2011 in Washington, D.C. Because I think this is relevant to understand which is exactly the spirit of some of these projects that have been financed by the European Commission, And also, which is the real motivation that is behind some of this work. The idea is that before the first thing to do in order to evaluate what is the role of innovation in an economic system, we need to measure innovation correctly. And then we will be able to understand how innovation can contribute to economic growth. So, the definition that I will refer to in this speech is a definition provided by Corrado, Altan, and Siegel in 2005 about intangible assets. In this table, sorry about the pointer.
You have to say it was any point. You pick up the one that you like best.
Okay. Very light, but okay. So essentially, what they did was to propose a new framework, which is partly new because some of the assets that they proposed to include in the definition of what are intangible assets are already capitalized in the national accounts. However, there are three broad categories of innovative assets that are computerized information that includes the production of software and databases, innovative property, including research and development and other types of creative work like entertainment and artistic originals. And then the last one, which is really a novelty compared to what is existing in the national accounts, are the economic competencies, which refers to the branding, for example, for specific human capital, which is essentially the effort that the firms do to train people inside the firms, and organizational capital, which is the development business models inside firms. Now, that idea was essentially to capitalize all these assets. And in the process of growth model, I will show you in a minute what this will imply, in order to see which is the contribution to economic growth of these assets. Now, just to give you a sense of how relevant they are, if you capitalize all of them, they are not at this stage in the national accounts, and you take the shares of GDP in the EU countries as a whole, in the EU 15, here, and then in the US and in the EU regions, these are the figures that you get. The blue bars refer to tangible capital, meaning the usual traditional capital that we all know, meaning machinery, equipment, and so on and so forth. While the greens are intangibles. As you can see, if you take the average of these shares between 1995 and 2009, in the US, the intangibles are more relevant than the tangibles. And you will see why this is relevant when you look at contribution to economic growth. And the same is mostly true in UK. Now you cannot see because this is the average between them, in Ireland and UK. While just notice that, for example, in the Mediterranean country, the gap is really huge. Yes?
What do you mean by intangible? Sorry, because I couldn't get it. I mean, it's intellectual property or what?
No, the intangibles are exactly what I showed here.
How do you measure it?
Some of them are measured by the national accounts, so it's a macro perspective. Others have been measured in the project that I mentioned. One is Spintan, that is the one that is going on, and there are other two previous projects where these intangible assets have been capitalized coherently with the national account system, meaning that essentially the national accounts have been adjusted to include these assets.
Just to get a sense, how do you measure organizational capital?
Organizational capital is measured looking at, I mean, there are two main components. Of course, and then I can give you all the details, the papers, and everything. But just to sum it up, the organizational capital is measured in two components. There is the own account, and the purchase component. The purchase component is essentially how much, for example, a firm purchase of a consultancy of and so on. Measured looking at the salaries of the managers that are employed in firm. And there is, account methodology to compute the own account in the Sorry?
And this is how you find.
Yes, exactly. Is it clear? Okay. Sorry, so this implies that essentially if you want to think about innovation in a slightly different manner as compared to what we have said so far, meaning that we want to try to build a framework where we are able to measure innovation, defining in a way that is the Ralph framework, and then we put this measure, this investment in sources of growth model that I will show you in a minute, you will see how relevant they are in terms of the contributions to economic growth. Again, just to give you a sense, if you look at the US figures only for the private sector for the moment, this is what you get. If you get these figures from 1977 up to 2010, and you look at the tangible, which are the blue, and the intangible dynamics, as you can see, intangible assets are growing faster than the tangible assets. Why this is relevant? Simply because this tells you that investment in innovation are growing very fast, and they may potentially provide a relevant contribution to economic growth. Now, if you then accept this framework and you decide to include intangible investment in a standard framework, you need to think that, for example, the traditional capital estimates are understated because essentially many costs of innovation are not counted as investment. Once you capitalize them, you realize that intangible capital accounts for 20 to 33% of labor productivity growth in the market sector of the US and the EU economies. So this is relevant. And the idea is that if we want to understand better what drives economic growth, you need to take into account the role of innovation and the role of intangible assets, probably taking this perspective. Now, I think I have just 10 minutes. Now, which is the aim of our work at this stage? Essentially, we worked in a previous project, which is called Incline Invest, where we measured the tangible investment for the business sector. This is an open source database, so you can go to the website and download the figures that we have produced. And this covers essentially a subset of industries which are referred to the business sector. Now, the aim of the SpinTime project, which is the one I'll show you in a second, essentially aims at covering the non-market sector, meaning the public sector. Why this is important? Because in order to understand drives productivity growth, we need to take into account both the role of the public and the private sector. Now, and of course, once we will be able to analyze, for example, how public and private sectors interact in this respect. Now, I will go very quickly. So what we do specifically, I'm going to present you really some figures because I mean, the idea is that I think it is relevant to start looking at quantify some of this phenomenon and look really if we accept this type of framework, how relevant can be innovation in terms of contribution. Now, what we did essentially was to take some industries that have really a public content. in the sense that there are industries that have, like, for example, if you think about education, we know that we have public and private universities, public and private schools, and so on and so forth. And what we did was to try to look at how much both private and public, for example, universities in the education sector invest in intangible assets. Why? Because then we want to look at the contribution of non-euro sectors and from both industries. What happens?
Now it's working.
No, I mean, you cannot see the charts.
Maybe it takes time to...
Hmm?
Non ci vuole un attimo per caricarli se sono grossi.
I'm sorry, the idea here was to show you the shares of intangible investment over value added for both the market and non-market sectors.
No problem. Have become overweight, and more options. Check with the
If you have questions in between, maybe we can use this time for questions. Okay, I'm sorry, I mean, this is really innovation and ICT. However, here there was a picture, a very nice one, with huge bars, where you could, maybe you will in a while, appreciate the shares of intangible investment over value added, both in the market and in the non-market sector, meaning the private and in the public sector. On average, you can see that the intangible investments accounts for 8 to 3% of total value added. In these figures, there is not R&D. So these are the new intangible investments, meaning that are, essentially the economic competencies that I mentioned before. And the interesting thing is that the private sector accounts for 5% of these shares, while the public sector of 0.8%. I will continue even if I'm not able to, now it doesn't work anymore, anything.
We're turning back to Seeker's computer, so we're going to get a map.
Okay, that's...
See the Bay Area economy. The Bay Area economy.
Okay, so then I'm in presentation. Sorry, since we lost some time, I will not show you any and so on and so forth. So this was the picture that I mentioned before. As you can see, here you have a selected number of countries from Spain, Austria, France, Germany, UK, and the US. And these are the intangible shares of total value added. And the red bars represent the non-market sector, meaning the public sector. So how much the public sector invests, accounts for this the share, and the blue refers to the private sector. So as you can see, it is rather heterogeneous. I mean, it goes from 0.2 in Spain and 0.7 in Italy to 1.6 in the US. Now, why this is interesting? Because if you then look at how much intensive are these sectors in terms of intangible, meaning how much the private and the public sector do invest, excluding R&D, that of course is a huge part, but these are only the intangibles that I mentioned before. This is what you get. The red bar refers to the non-market share, meaning the public share. So these are represent how much the public sector in each of these countries is intensive in intangible investment. As you can see, you have 1.7 in Spain, but then you have UK is 9.5, US is 9.4. They are even more intangible intensive compared to the private sector. This is relevant. Why? Because if you then look at how much they are able to stimulate investment in innovation in the private sector, the more they are innovative, the more they are able to stimulate innovation in the private sector. And at the same time, they can provide a huge contribution to economic growth and the total economy. Now, again, if we run a very simple exercise, it is really an accounting exercise where we calculate how much this type of investment contributes to economic growth. So how much they are able to contribute to labor productivity in the specific case, and we do this exercise for only a selected number of countries because the data are not yet perfect. And without R&D software, I mean, all the assets that I defined at the beginning, this is what we get. In this chart, you have for each country corresponds to the productivity, the average productivity growth for the whole period, which is 1995 to 2010. Then you have, for example, for the first country, ES market and ES non-market, you have the productivity in the private sector and the productivity in the public sector. And the blocks corresponds to the contribution of each component, where the green refers to the total factor productivity, which is what you cannot measure, let's say, very easily. The blue corresponds to the tangible capital, and the red to the intangible capital. As you can see, just for example, look at Finland and UK, where investment in intangible assets and innovation are rather high. As you can see, in the public sector, the red bars are rather relevant. They provide a rather relevant contribution. I mean, the figures that you can see here looks very small to you, but I mean, if you take into account that here you are looking at an average period, which is 1995 to 2010, this is not so bad. And why? Because if you then decompose, just to give you a sense of what's going on, because I do not have time for the details, if you decompose the period and you look at the pre-crisis period and at the post-crisis and the crisis period, which is 2007 and 2009, the only thing that you should notice is that the contribution of intangible capital, which is the red, corresponds to the red blocks, essentially has been positive even during the financial crisis. Why? Because the idea is that investment in innovation are able, for their own characteristics, to be supportive even during a financial crisis. I need to go quick. So what are the main policy challenges if we accept this framework? Well, the idea is that a very important and relevant characteristic of intangible capital is that it is growth promoting. It is investment in innovation. Why? Essentially because it has a non-driven nature. If you think about R&D, I mean, it's like, all the characteristics of non-excludability in principle. And there is a literature, which is an emerging literature, showing that there is a linkage between accumulation in intangible capital, so in innovation, and total factor productivity growth via diffusion. So this is relevant because if there are spillovers from this type of investment, this can be really a key variable in terms of policy to stimulate economic growth. A very quick thought at the end. Anyway, despite the progresses that have been made in the measurement of these assets, at this stage, the policy implications from this analysis have not been really taken as they should have, simply because still some of these intangibles that I mentioned can be considered a little bit exotic. If you think about organization of capital, there is a huge discussion going on about really how to define what organization of capital is and how to include this type of investment in a system of national accounts, because this is what at the end we need to do. Anyway, if we want to really promote of innovation, this type of investment, this is consistent with the goal of attaining a higher productivity level and a higher living standard. Thank you.
Thank you for the interesting speech, and I think your conclusions sort of answered the question I had, but to be more clear, when we speak in innovation terms, we often say technology readiness levels, going from a low level, which is unproven, to something which is completely proven, you can actually use safely and commercially and so on. Looking at your framework, what is your technology readiness level from 1 to 10?
What is? Sorry.
The readiness level. I mean, how confident are you that the whole system of measuring, of inferring these causal relationships and so on can actually be safely used for policy making?
Well, at this stage of the research, since now it is something like 10 years that this research started, I can say that we are more than 6, 7. Because what I mean is how much confident you are in the measures, in the estimates that have been produced so far, essentially. Because these measures, these estimates have to be used to run exercises and so on and so forth, and eventually to derive policy implications.
It's more than the measurement, it's the measurement and all the causal implications that you're drawing from them.
Yeah, I didn't talk about the causal relationship because they are really, it is something really in progress. There have been just few papers looking at the causal relationship, for example, between TFP and accumulation of intangible capital. What I can say is that they look very promising. So I'm quite confident that this can really be a new perspective that can provide a new way of designing innovation policy. Okay. Now we have Lidio Sinfo speaking about the state.
Well, to begin with, Massimo Caccia invited me, whom I profusely thanked, suggested me, well, he asked me to present in a way and give a strong support to the thesis put forward by Mariana. He also suggested me to sort of provoke this in order to suggest discussion, and I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you, at least on two grounds. First of all, I'm not Mariana Mazzucato. She's much better looking than me to begin with. Mariana is a very, very good friend of mine. We have been knowing each other for ages now. I certainly support most of all of what she writes in her book. But again, I will not present Mariana's book, but my own ideas on the book. The second matter of disappointment is that when preparing this presentation, I thought that perhaps I will not be as provocative as I wish to be. After all, most of the things I'm going to say look to me pretty common sense. Right? And there is a lot of room for agreement rather than disagreement. We could find some very good reason for disagreement. This is good news. Okay? So let me start, I'm going to say, from the very, very basics. I cannot resist the temptation to start from Vannevar Bush. Okay? For those who are not acquainted, this is a document that the then President of the United States, Roosevelt died in the process, asked to Vannevar Bush, who was a great president of MIT, a very important figure in science and technology policy in the United States, even though science and technology didn't exist as such. And he was asked to produce a document in a sense to support, to promote the idea that science policy and technology policy was a proper concern for the government. Behind that was the idea of creating a national agency, which afterwards turned out to be on a much lesser scale than national science foundations. So Vannevar Bush wrote this document. You can easily find it on the web. I think it is a very structured document, and just excerpt quotations here. First point, science is a proper concern of the government. Well, that's is that right? Does it sound obvious or totally stupid? I'm not going through reading the whole quotation, but Bush is writing. Well, it is in the nature of the government, of a good government, to keep frontiers open, to open new frontiers, and science is a new frontier. So this is a proper role of the government. Then, health, well-being, security are obvious primary concerns for a good government, and therefore scientific progress in those fields is essential. Support for by the government to science and technology is not new in the United States, even though it was never structured, organized, and published. Okay? Now is the time to do it. Government's support to science and technology has to do mainly with what we call now, loosely speaking, basic research, but it is not only. There are areas of science in which the public interest is acute, but which are likely to be cultivated inadequately if left without more support from the state. Very simple. Military farming, agriculture, housing, public health, medical research, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Now, that's very simple. It sounds, I think, sensible. I would say that it is very striking to go back to this, precisely because it is, a simplified essence of the reasons why we believe that it is proper, it is in the role of the state to support science and technology. Now, I would not go into the historical details, but one way through which the message by Valerie Woods was translated in economic analysis, economic theory, is the so-called Aronson model, independently created, produced two papers at the same time, basically making something different in the same point. The central point that they pointed out is that technology has a property of a public good. In a sense, it is like information. Technology is like information, and therefore it is a property of a public good, which means that private profit-motivated agents will not invest enough in those activities, in creating those activities, and they're doing it very short. Why? Because they cannot reap all the profit, the welfare coming to the society into the form of private profit. And therefore, they will not invest. If I produce an innovation, which is in nature just pure information, written down, and everybody has access to it, well, why should I spend money on that? They get no profit. Therefore, this is the classic theory of public good. There are a couple of ways out of it. First of all, subsidies. Okay? Give subsidy companies in order to sustain this cost, which in many cases are fixed costs, sunk costs. Second, introduce intellectual property, patents. That give you a monopoly power. You can exclude somebody else to use this information, this innovation, and therefore can earn a profit. For how long, how much, well, the question is. Or government intervention, directly government subsidizing, paying for very simple stimulus. Now, to some extent, well, I don't think this is true. In all countries in the world, although at a different level, but actually the public sector, the government, spends a lot of money in public research. And even at time, more or less like this one, when many people say that the government should step down, and the private should do it, well, governments are not really listening that much. Lucky. Perhaps they are not listening to economists, to those economists, and they're doing a very good job. So the share of the public sector funding research, and by the way, basic research, the role of the government in basic research is much, much higher, around 60%, 40%. So there is the idea that this notion is not that crazy. Here again, public funding of R&D as a percentage of GDP in various countries doesn't give you an idea. Now, this is the beginning of the story, and then Mariana comes in with this book. In fact, she is suggesting a significant step forward, and a real step, from the simplistic way of understanding the Aronson model. But again, it is fair to say that she's probably the first to recognize that her work builds cumulatively on the shoulders of giants, like Christopher Freeman, Keith Pallet, Dick Mason, David Rosenberg, and others. But to put it in a nutshell, that phrase that she uses is, well, the role of the state in innovation is not simply fixing market failures, imperfections, the public good problem, but it's actually to create new opportunities and new markets. In doing that, she's actually quoting John Maynard Keynes in the sort of okay? Now, evidence, well, think of computers, semiconductors, internet, biotechnology, that part of the pharmaceutical, the nanotechnology. She traces back, in many cases, the history of the evolution of this industry. And at the beginning, in value, and in many different articulated ways, there is a crucial role of the expenditure. I would add, by the way, think of computers, think of semiconductors, think of internet, certainly pharmaceutical industry. They not only come from the crucial role of the state, but actually, unfortunately, by the war. World War II, the computers, etc., all IT, most of the pharmaceutical industry was actually born thanks to government public role during World War II. Other examples, I mean, in a very undisciplined way, I can just pick up some of them here. Of course, you can find many other examples where of important innovations where the state did not have any role. But my simple point here is yes, in most of the cases, in many cases, in most of the most paradigmatic technologies, the role of the state at the beginning has been crucial to actually creating those technologies. Now, this is a picture I took from a paper by Bill Lazarek, and this is the NIH budget over time. Look at that. And then wonder, why is it that the USA is so far advanced in biopharmaceuticals as compared to other countries? I mean, this is a staggering amount of money. And think about accumulating all that money year by year. It is a stable, enormous amount of funding. Mainly going to research, not only basic research, but a large fraction of it, but also very important clinical research. Now, surprise, surprise, how is it that the United States are much more advanced than anybody else in the world? Implicitly, in a way, when we in this little country are asked, what should we do for the biotechnology industry, etc., listen, there is a big problem of the quality of the research, but there is a main problem of the quantity of the resources available for research. And you can get higher quality only if you have a pool. In order to skip that. Let me finish with that. Mariana and myself, we can go beyond our layers. And in fact, research and innovation in the past 20, 30 years has gone far away than the simple our lesson. One way of putting it is that technology is not simply information, it's knowledge. And between information and knowledge. Knowing to do something, well, if knowledge were information, simply information, we should not go to school. Just learn to read. You should not go to the university. But how is it that in order to learn some math, we have to make exercises, right? So there is an enormous difference. That means also that technology is not completely classic and malleable to economic and other social forces, signals. Technology and science have a logic of its own. It is certainly strongly influenced by economic motivation. Most of the R&D is done actually by firms, right? But it's not totally first. You can pour all the money you want into finding a vaccine for HIV, but it's a hard problem. It's difficult, and in fact, we still do not have a vaccine for HIV. Market signals are certainly fundamental in influencing the exploitation of innovative opportunities, but can do very little in creating those opportunities. Certainly, again, cumulative technological change, learning to do something continuously create new opportunities. But when you're talking about such things like computers, IT, biopharma, etc., it's not simply human. It's big bodies of knowledge which are created from science. So again, technological change is certainly enormously influenced by economic incentives, but especially at the formative stage, it is military reasons to begin. Probably, perhaps I would guess, the single most important one way or another. Healthcare, curiosity of the scientists, autonomous and cumulative technological process. Now, then, innovation is also generated by a huge and complex variety of different actors interacting with each other, different bodies of knowledge, etc. They have different motivations, different skills. Such diversity is essential for innovation. Nobody, not single in the government, not single the private firms, etc., can dream of really sustaining a sustained innovative process on their own. Complementarity among these factors is absolutely crucial. If there is one lesson that we have learned in economics of innovation, is that this complementarity is the name of the game. Finally, let me finish. One additional role, in my view, of public funded research is simply that we have the intuition, and I think that the intuition is largely correct and sustained by strong empirical evidence, that innovation, technical change, technical product flourishes when knowledge circulates as free as possible. Right? Of course, as I said before, private profit-motivated agents do not like circulation of knowledge too much. They want to keep their innovation, profits from innovation for themselves. Markets, profit rights. Of course, there is some need for that, but not too much. Let us not forget that freedom in the circulation of knowledge is essential. And my feeling is that in the past 30 years, we have gone far too far away for a reasonable degree of protection of and too much against the freedom of circulation of knowledge. Interestingly, when economists started looking actually at the empirical evidence about the effects of stronger or weakened patent system, the first reaction was, actually, we know nothing. the evidence is very scarce. Those were the times when Bardot was introduced in the United States, when university interaction with firms was strongly supported with property rights, of course, otherwise it would happen separately. Again, times. Honestly, I can tell you that most of the evidence that has been produced is largely negative. Okay? Strong property rights are detrimental effects on innovation. So better still possible. In fact, The Economist came out a couple of weeks ago with an article called that said, perhaps we should abolish patents. Right? So it is not simply the same funding, it is also and mainly skills and capabilities. So public research, beyond what Mariana says correctly in my point, is we can think about this as an essential infrastructure for everything, for any kind of research which is done. And finally, after all, coming back perhaps to Vannevar Bush, public research is politics in the good sense of the term, meaning the vision of the state to produce better life for citizens. Thank you very much.
Be short because we are running out of time.
I would like just to suggest whether it would not be better, instead of speaking of private and public, state and market as some sort of opposite or alternative, would be better to speak about for-profit or not for-profit. Because now in the public sector, we have a lot of private foundations that are putting much more funds, I would say, even than public or government. And in addition, I completely agree with one line of your slide that public and private must be complementary and not a substitute. I mean, in Europe, and I understand also in the United States, we have some sort of culture by which is either the state or the market, while in other areas, in speaking of course of East Asia, they are complementary and they are synergic, of course, with a lot of negative outcomes too. But I think that it would be better to stop thinking that either we have to support the state or the public and leaving the market, or vice versa, and the complementarity ought to be the solution. Thank you.
I certainly agree, but not only just to put this into perspective. Certainly complementarity is out there. We see, of course, as I said, problem was and is that if anything, in the past 20 years, there has been a strong political movement in the direction of cutting public funding of research in many countries of the world, or at least an ideology. Similar things as far as for-profit or non-profit. The only difference, for instance, I happen to participate in certain debates on the role of PPP, public-private partnership, in the pharmaceutical industry, healthcare, etc. And one of the, well, a lot of studies showing claiming that PPPs are the best way of organizing the job, which is okay to me. When we look at the evidence, we can discuss it case by case, etc. However, there is those kind of arguments tend to forget some very fundamental principle. For example, those institutions, organizations, in what way are they accountable? I do not mean in the sense of in the terms of democracy, in the terms of political terms. They are not. The main private, non-for-profit agency funding health research is the Gates Foundation. Right? Thanks God that Bill and Melinda Gates do that, but they are becoming practically monopolists once again in that sense. I think that should make us think about that. So, even a thing, in my view, should remain public to make it very start. Collaborating, of course, and interacting with privates, but let us not forget too much that the state has something fundamental.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Tomorrow we'll be speaking more in detail about proprietary versus open approach in patent and intellectual property. And we'll also have a presentation about public-private partnership in pharmaceutical sector. Now we have Antonio Andreoli speaking about innovation economy also again in manufacturing sector.
The one thing we are slightly tired, so we'll try to really be provocative, as I was invited to do. And then I will start saying a couple of things, thanks to the last presentation, because we started introducing a bit of history and a bit of grounding into the picture in the sense of trying to go back and understand where lots of this discussion really come from. And the fact that actually we can go even back in the 18th, 17th century and see that these are always discussions around scientists, engineers, and so on that we discuss. The second point is that ideologies don't help too much, in the sense that we have to probably look at these things from a political economy angle, but pre-judgment about in this sector is better than the state or the market don't have. Because we have lots of cases, the world is full of lots of variety of ways of managing the economy, and actually we have successful cases in both sides. The third point is actually that if we talk about innovation, I think everyone who wants to work on innovation has to visit companies. Because we learn what innovation is really about, what technology is really about. Visiting companies and talking with people who do the innovation, who are very often people also at the level of the shop floor level, who are really engaging with all the different stages of the development of the technology, from the initial ideas to the improvements to the scaling up of the technologies and so on and so forth. I work at the University of Cambridge and the University of London, mainly at the University of Cambridge with engineers in the engineering department, and I teach economics also at the University of London. I will present a paper with some other ideas, and to be brief, which did some work I've been doing for the Stiglitz Task Force at Columbia University on industrial policy. So let me try to be brief, and eventually in discussion will focus more on the specific cases I've been looking at. First of all, I think we need to understand the variety of industrial policy experiences and approaches, and where these experiences really come from. And secondly, the type of experiences we see around are very complex, even from the point of view of looking at the different type of measures and packages of measures that government have been putting in place, and understand how these measures that governments have been implementing have been actually governed and have been organized in different type of models. And the third point is that, which is really will will develop in the presentation, is that we need to try to get a sense of what are the emerging that there are two fundamental areas which are related to the technological infrastructure and the financial infrastructure that support the innovation process. And some of these issues have been emerging in the discussion in the previous presentation as well. And the last point is that we really need to look at both the quantum, the size of the intervention, but also the quality, the characteristics of what these interventions are really about. I was very happy to see some reference to Corfo, but even we were discussing yesterday what Corfo does and the technology offering of that institution are different from even an organization which is very close, Fundación Chile. So when we talk about technology and technology infrastructure, when we look at what we have, for example, in Europe, we have to be very careful in looking at what do Fraunhofer do in Germany, how do they interact with the private sector, what are the type of specific infra technologies they provide, and so on. And in doing that, we really need to go deep at the micro level and have the humility as economists to understand technologies and where innovation is really coming from. So, lots of countries do industrial policy, and say almost all of them in some form. And the reason why there is lots of variety in terms of these approaches is that the type of industrial policy they do to a certain extent reflect the type of sectoral composition they have. This very often we look for specific models we want to imitate from other countries, but for example, the model in the Silicon Valley works because there is a certain type of configuration. The Fraunhofers that all the countries want to imitate work because they are in Germany working in a certain setting. And in different moments in history, we've been seeing much more openness towards this type of approaches, while in others, almost ideological closure and the idea that any form of intervention is problematic. So the best industrial policy in the past was to be no policy at all for a long time. The second point is that in this type of understanding of the variety of approaches, we need to be able to understand what are the real structural transformations that characterize the economies in the production economies. There's lots of discussion around global value chains, around the organization of production and manufacturing system around the world, and we have to probably follow better understand and find the metrics to understand where value is vested. If we take this typical example that also Mariana does, the Apple, we take any other complex products, the product is done of many subcomponents, and the value of that final product is the result of a specific subcomponent that very few companies are able to produce. From the fact that that product is the integration of different components that is difficult to do. So we have to understand where value is vested, where value is created, so what type of configuration of capabilities, competencies are necessary to generate these products, and understand who is capturing this value in terms of what are the countries, the companies, the organization that are really able to control global value chain, this even within the ecosystem approach, what are the actors who are adding a specific say on that. And in particular, we need to reground some of this discussion also in the details of the specificity of changes in technologies. For example, today we have lots of discussion around should we go for manufacturing and services? In fact, when you talk with engineers, you realize that today the products are basically platforms that contain and are able to host lots of services. So there is lots of symbiotic relationship there. And if you visit companies, you also realize that in the same way, lots of the innovations are cut across sectors, are not really easy to understand. And visit companies in the Emilia Romagna where there's lots of field work, where there is one company who produced Ferrari electronics for controlling all the car, and working with medical device for the dialysis machine, but also working with companies like KUKA, which is within the world of robotics, and so on and so forth. So it's very difficult, and very strange animals, and these animals are those that are able to generate innovation. I'm very quickly, because it takes lots of time. We wanted to stress the fact that the institutional settings are very different across countries. I mean, the story of Corfo, why is that Fundación Chile was created in the 70s? Why is that each country has its own history of building these type of institutions? All these things matter because create a setting in which actually policies are then implemented. And also affect the way in which countries are able to do policy. Now, I work in the UK, partially also with the government, and this is a country where over the last year we lost lots of regional agencies that were actually doing industrial innovation policy in the past, and now they are finding it difficult to implement some of these policies. So you can have different approaches according to the institutional setting you have. More top-bottom or bottom-up, like in the case of Germany, more mixed multi-layer system, and so on. I will skip this slide, this will take too much time. So if we want to navigate this variety, this complexity in terms of different sectoral composition, different technology trajectory, different institutional setting, different openness towards policies, one first way to start is really to look at what policymakers do and what type of policies they've been really implementing on the ground, and then trying to reconstruct the complexity of that. And in order to do that, if we have learned something about the countries who have been successful in doing some of these policies, especially the East Asian miracle famous story, probably many of you heard about the East Asian miracle, right? Korea was poorer than Nigeria in 1965. So how do they manage to develop state-owned enterprises like POSCO or big companies that are now increasingly gaining worldwide share? Well, they were mainly operating with packaging of interactive measures. I usually hear a quote from Stiglitz, but fundamentally combining different types of interventions. Interventions that sometimes might appear even contradictory. They were partially protecting and partially increasing competition. They were partially opening new markets and partially controlling the development of markets. A way to map what some of the countries are doing at the moment is to basically create some mapping or doing some mapping exercises. This is something that we've been doing for a project. We were comparing 6 major industrialized and industrializing economies. And fundamentally, the idea is to say, let's start looking at the different areas of intervention, both the supply side and demand side. And let's try to see how these measures have been implemented in terms of, on the one side, who is the policy actor who is operating. So is it the state, is the federal level, the state level, the regional level, the municipalities, European level, whatever. And let's see also at what level of the manufacturing system they've been operating. They've been operating focusing on certain sector, focusing on certain firms, focusing on the ecosystem or manufacturing system, and so on. And the exercise here is really trying to position these different measures and understand how the policy actor has been trying to coordinate their intervention. Very brief example, in the UK we had sectoral policies and technology policies. Are these type of interventions, which means supporting advanced material, is the support for advanced material in line with the intervention on, for example, in that case, aerospace? Do the aerospace sector needs new composites to develop their technologies, their products? So we've been doing this type of lots of these exercises, and we've been looking at what we can learn from them. Well, first of all, we can learn that the old debate about the state should not pick winners, should not look at really interfere too much in the market. It's actually not really the case, because any type of decision has fundamentally selective result. If you train engineers, chemical engineers is not like training electronic engineers. If you invest in certain technology infrastructure, like in the case of Corfu or Fraunhofer, you decide if you want to support advanced material, nanotechnology, mechanics, mechatronics application for control systems, and so on and so forth. So you have lots of these aspects. And then often also realize that you can get different results from different combination of policies. So it's never a straightforward linear relationship between a policy and a certain type of intervention. The second thing that we learn is that government has to try to align all these different interventions, has to try to govern, coordinate intervention across different levels of policy. And this is one of the big challenges that we have in Europe, where we have the European level, the national level, the regional level, and very often even, like in the case of Germany, intervention from the municipalities. And there is also a problem of synchronizing this intervention over time, where there was a reference to the policy side. Lots of the challenges that companies have, even in countries where there is lots of support, is actually that lots of the policies overlap, and they do not really know how this, what is the policy context of the sector subsidies and opportunities that the state can provide. So we've been doing lots of these exercises, trying to understand both synchronically and diachronically what the different countries are doing, And we come out with lots of interesting metrics that you can actually not simply position the policies, but you can also see the quantum of the policies. So you can start seeing how many millions or billions of euro have been invested in the different areas. And you get quite interesting results. These are various hundreds of policy documents that have been checked and then have been there have been a sort of follow-up and trying to see if the policies that were announced were not followed. What we learn here is that there is lots of variety, but there are also areas where all the countries seem to be particularly interested in operating with that. In order to operate exactly with this ecosystem and complex system, countries who have the infrastructure, like Germany and Japan, prefer to adopt a multi-layer governance system, where lots of the information comes bottom up from lots of institutions on the ground. Like in the case of Germany, if you look at the last policy, Industry 4.0, was really orchestrated at federal level, but there were lots of the Royal Engineering Academy, the Fraunhofer's, companies from the different regions were participating to understand really what were the specific needs and the trajectories that the country should follow. But there are other countries where this is not possible, and they're trying to develop institutions to do that. We also realized that even in countries like China, Brazil, South Africa, without talking about the US or Germany, they are increasingly moving beyond this idea of I support simply a sector. There is an attempt to try to develop interventions that in a sense support lots of complementarities across sectors. So for example, in the European Union now we talk a lot about intervening at the level of enabling technologies. And by definition, enabling technologies, nanomaterial, nanotechnologies, biotech, and so on, they are things that cut across different areas of intervention. So this is also very important because when we talk about the state intervening in science and intervening in the market, we need to understand really what this means in terms of supporting specific sectors and different types of technologies. We have different level of public good nature. Now, if you compare an infra technology like metrology systems, scaling up facilities, and so on, are very different from other type of platform technologies. I would like to emphasize two last issues, which is really the technology infrastructure and the two main areas where it seems governments are really putting lots of effort. And I would like to emphasize the fact that the countries who are most successful in terms of innovation are also those countries where the link between the manufacturing, the production activity, and the R&D activity is still very strong. And this is something that even in the US they are rediscovering after years where there's been this idea of the industrialization, knowledge economy, and all the idea that in a sense we can live in a really material world. At the end of the story, the evidence is that Germany has been able to go through the crisis and maintain a fantastic, even too strong performance in terms of trade, in terms of innovating across many types of products. And at the moment, they can actually pretty much suggest a policy at the European level that push on digitalization, services and so on, but because they have a very strong manufacturing capacity left in the country. The same for Japan and so on. And all these countries will be maintaining that capacity are those that invested dramatically in supporting manufacturing companies in going through all the TRL, the technological readiness levels that our colleague was mentioning before, which means scaling up technologies, which means moving from a prototype to prime series and going through all the stages to develop something that, for example, in the case of UK, we're not good at all in doing, and that's why we have massive problem in our balance of trade. And fundamentally, maintain a strong linkage between the place where the knowledge is created to a certain extent and the place where the knowledge is transformed in real products, real product system, and so on. The second issue is really, I will skip through, there are lots of issues related to the different forms of interventions. I would just say, if you have a look at this project, this is the MIT Production and Innovation Economy report, which was produced recently by a team at MIT to actually understand what was happening in the global manufacturing system and what was happening to the US system in relation to that. Let me use a couple of minutes to talk about the very last issue, which is the financial infrastructure. It's extremely critical in manufacturing, in economy and for a manufacturing system, that the financial infrastructure is able to understand what are the specific financial needs of companies. And in that sense, we need to be very open to a variety of intervention. I mean, in Germany, the KfW, the State-Owned Development Bank, is playing a very important role in supporting various forms of intervention. Some people mentioned the SBIR. The SBIR program is a program of public procurement to a certain extent, where the government in the US suggests companies, we need to have this technology. Whoever is going to be able to do it is going to get money, some supporting research, and a commission for developing that program. All this intervention that makes both financial support in the traditional sense and strategic public procurement are extremely critical to support companies, especially in those stages, the famous value of that story, of stages of the process of innovation where the systemic risk is extremely high. Summing up, I think we need to go beyond, and to a certain extent, European discussion went beyond the Lisbon agenda, the idea of a knowledge economy, and all this deindustrialization processes narrative, because we are more ideologically driven than anything else. When you talk with engineers and people who are seriously doing industrial policy in other countries, these are not really anymore the issues on the table. The manufacturing production matters for innovation and growth in different ways, because we need to acknowledge the extreme heterogeneity of manufacturing production industries. And for different reasons, because at the end of the story, if you look at the place where R&D investments are still done, are still all manufacturing companies to a certain extent. Scale and spillover effects are extremely important to have. The case of Professor Chile, again, I refer to that because I've been working a lot on that. We all drink very good Chilean wine. We all have salmon from Chile, at least one time in our life. This comes from specific investment in scaling up technologies to reach the level of standard of quality for this type of products. And although they were a food industry, the amount of production technologies that were used to reach these standards is very high. So there are lots of reasons why this is particularly important. This is the very last slide, which I've tried to be a bit more polemic, or try to open some debate and discussion. I think we need really to go beyond this taboo, this idea of that certain countries do industrial policy, other countries don't do it. I think the best industrial policy is actually convincing other countries that they are not doing any industrial policy, which is what, for many years, few very strong industrialized countries, including the US and Germany, have been doing. There are varieties of models. There are lots of challenges in implementing them. But fundamentally, here, the last quote is from H.G. Stiglitz: if you don't fail with some of these policies, you haven't tried up enough. Which means that as soon as we understand that the state can play within the market an entrepreneurial role, we have to accept the idea that failure and problems will be involved as much as in the private sector. Thanks. Sorry for the... Should we get...
No, just we finish with the questions and then there will be break and then we follow up. Are you going to final? Okay, Massimo was the final talk and then we break. And do you have any questions?
Keep the questions for the roundtable discussion.
Yeah. I have a question regarding policies, and that's all right, I think, but also then we have the political shifts going from a right-wing government to a left-wing government. And that, of course, gives kind of a to create open policies. How do we actually cope with that on the long-term level?
I think it's very constant. For example, if you look at the US, the support to the SBIR program, just to keep with the example, was actually, there was a degree of increase during the Obama administration, but was supported also by the Bush administration. In the case of UK, we had the opposite situation. Actually, the Tories were, under Vince Cable, much more supportive of industrial policy and actually reopened the sectoral policies in the UK, while the Labour was not really into that. So I think we have, even here, I mean, it's very difficult to understand why, in the slide of skip, what are the political settlements or the groups that really are in favor of supporting a certain type of intervention. So it's very specific on each context. And there are some countries for some reason managed to find a sort of agreement around the fact that the value is generated in certain type of activities and sectors, and that independently from who is going to be the leader in the country, these sectors and these activities must remain fundamentally the main driver of economic growth in the country. And also because we are talking about sectors that require support, not in a discontinuous way, but in a very continuous way. I mean, lots of examples we're talking about, think about Nokia, many successful cases of companies. Nokia for 10 years was losing money, right? So if you have a very short-term approach to this type of support, nothing is going to come out of that.
I wonder if you have good examples of the ways in which governments have been able to identify new potential areas of economic activity that industrial policy should focus on. I assume there are various ways in which the potential has been identified.
Well, in Europe we have, for example, in the case of Germany, they've been doing lots of technological road mapping exercises, right? Where we're trying to see what are the potential needs in terms of mobility, health, areas of needs, and understanding what are going to be the technologies that will support these specific industries that are going to address these issues. Japan did the same for robotics a long time ago, and at the end of that, they are the most advanced country in that respect. So I think all countries have been using, even at the European level, we had the Manufacture project, which was a massive project that was trying to really understand how the manufacturing system was transforming, given the global transformation, but at the same time, how the future needs of people are going to be not matched by the current industrial system. So there are plenty of things, but they are very detailed because in order to understand what you're going to need for example, supporting an aging population, means understanding what type of specific set of technologies can be required to support lots of complex machines that substitute basically lots of the work in the hospitals by people who are going to use them, right? I work at automatic dialysis, for example. These are, you have to think about machines that are like 1,300 components. The type of tests that you do in these machines are equal only to the tests that you do direct from extremely complex problems. So to understand really what type of combination of different technologies you are going to need for that, it's really a very complex exercise. But technological road mapping is one of the main tools that is being used in that respect.
Thank you. I'm referring to the last
point.
It seems to me that one of the main emerging problems that come in doing this kind of industrial policy is actually how much failure is tolerated on the public sector. Right? In the private sector, innovation comes through failures. Massive experimentation, many failures, a few successes. In the public domain, this is not acceptable. Politicians dislike mistakes. Voters and taxpayers dislike mistakes. But if we are really serious in talking about policy experimentation in certain environments, I think we have to face this thing.
Absolutely. I fully agree. There are some exercises now that, in terms of policy evaluation, framed more in terms of policy learning, which is really, let's see, what theory of change, and try to understand how the type of intervention has been actually activated as a causation mechanism, for example, in an industrial ecosystem. But we also have quite a lot of evidence about some type of instruments that seems to work better than others. I mean, I have to go very quickly, but it's not the case. This build program has been copied by China with the torch program long years ago. US tried to do the same. UK tried to do the same with this build program. If you look at what Germany has been doing with the ZIM program, which is another small and medium enterprise support, there are some parties that seem to have some solidity or some, on average, allows you to get quite good results. So I think learning about how this works and how they can be translated in a different context can be a way to use part of this problem of failures in soccer.
Speaking about some of the ideas behind the university. No questions now. We will be back and you can ask questions to Matteo during the roundtable.
Okay, and since we are late, we break after the roadshow, and then we resume the roundtable.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start following Luigi Borsellino's introduction. I too was asked to play a role, a part here, and this is the opposite part, in the sense that I should argue against the Mazzucato entrepreneurial state and in favor of the role of innovative private firms. And as Luigi said, I'm going to disappoint the organizer too, because I don't, for two reasons, let's say. The first reason is that whatever the definition of Mariana Mazzucato entrepreneurial state you like, I think it's impossible to conclude that the entrepreneurial state is not important at some degree. And the second reason is system, a very complex system, so Mariana Mazzucato cannot state that private firms are not important. I cannot state that private firms are the most important thing. So what I try to do here, you ask, is to say, I start from the assumption that private firms are very important for innovation, and then the way I try to make a difference with respect to Mazzucato's view is to argue in favor of the non-entrepreneurial state. So that's the subtitle of my presentation. That, as you will see, in a sense, we go back to the role of the state as the one fixing market failures, but I think there is something more. I will try to argue on that. Just quickly, the entrepreneurial state is a state that is research and actively interact with the innovation system. Actually, she claims at some point that none of this technological revolution, the one that we decided, would have occurred without the leading role of the state. The alternative view I'm trying to discuss today, which is highly criticized by Mazzucato in the book, is the state that simply, invests in skill, does a strong science base, and guarantees the framework, the legal or economic framework that is necessary for private firms to innovate. So these are the two views. Obviously, it's not very clear where is the distinction between the two, but just take it like this. And so we try to discuss around this type of thinking. So, the question is, does a country innovation capability benefit more from an entrepreneurial state than from a non-entrepreneurial state? So this is, in a sense, the idea will be working around. So if I take the Mazzucato view, there are, in my view, some questions that are unanswered, in the sense that it's not clear if this entrepreneurial state is the necessary condition, the condition sine qua non for a successful innovation system. What would happen if if there are no competitive and innovative private firms in the system? I mean, firms that are able to absorb new technology and, as she says, created by the entrepreneurial state. And what happens to the ability of these firms if the state doesn't play another role, which is the non-entrepreneurial state role? So the way I proceed is what I would say bottom up. I mean, Mariana Mazzucato starts from the top, from the state. I start from the firms, and then I see where I get when I go to the role of the state. In doing this, I will focus on Italy. I apologize for that. That's the country I know the best,
and also because within the Bank of Italy, we had 2 years ago a huge research project on innovation where we tried to look at all different dimensions of innovation, so I have some information on that. Obviously, I joined Declare, as I said. Mariana Mazzucato, in my view, does not prove that the entrepreneurial state is a necessary condition for having a successful innovation system. I cannot prove that the private firms are the key element of the story. So innovation, this is completely useless. I just collected some definition. What we are talking about, this is important. I mean, it's not important to people like you, but because I think that as an economist, I have to clarify what I mean for innovation. Obviously, it's a multidisciplinary concept, and here there are many hard scientists, I'm a social scientist, and so as Cecilia was saying in her presentation, to me, innovation is an engine of economic growth. Then what is behind innovation? This is tricky. There are many examples of measurement of innovation and with pros and cons. But what I want you to take home is that in my case, it's not necessarily the breakthrough innovation of Mariana Mazzucato. She has a list of breakthrough innovation. In my case, it's just innovation. So let's go back to the first presentation of this morning. There we have, product and process innovation subjectively declared by firms. I don't know, maybe it was just a table with 3 legs instead of 4. I don't really care about that. I care, as Cecilia is trying to do, that these kind of things have an impact on growth. This is the view of an economist. So these are innovation, okay? Probably even an economist would say that these are no innovation, but there are many things in between. So this is more or less the message I would like to give you. Maybe these are innovation too. That maybe the one on the right is useful, I guess. But okay. So a complex innovation system. So there are many actors and players. This is in graph what many people have already told today. So the government is a part of that, but the government can play a different role than the financial system, the firms, the education system, which could be part of the government. Not in all countries or with different degree in different countries. So there are many actors. Okay, some data. Here I will go very fast because I mean the presentation this morning had a lot of data, and honestly, the way I would ask you to look at my data is to focus progressively more on Italy, because then my argument will be developed on the Italian case. As Ugo told us this morning, Italy is lagging behind. This is a graph with the R&D expenditure on GDP, distinguishing the private and the public components. You can see we have a total which is lower in Spain than the other countries. And then if you look inside, what is missing in Italy is the private one, in comparative terms, more than the public one. And actually, in our research project, we have some papers that I'm not going to discuss today, trying to measure the quality and the quantity of public research by universities and other quasi-public agencies, and we see that Italy is performing quite well in comparative terms. Then obviously, if you don't like R&D, which is the input of innovation input, let's go to an output. We don't like patents too, but in terms of patents, Italy is performing very badly. Then let's go to, on the right side, on trademarks and industrial design, and Italy is performing relatively better. But what I'm really interested in when I look at this number is the role of firm size. Because this brings me close to the peculiarities of Italian economy. This is a share of firm with the R&D expenditure within the firm. And you see that in all countries there is a positive relationship, nothing surprise. I mean, more likely R&D expenditure within larger firms than within smaller firms. This is true in all countries. And if you don't like, R&D, because R&D is kind of hard measure of innovation, and you like just the subjective measure, as I told you before, do you make any innovation? So this is the share of firm answering yes to this question. As you can see, there might be some bias, but still, again, we have this positive relationship between size and innovation. Why is this important? Because when we go and look at the Italian productive system, this is the first feature that comes out. I mean, Italy, as you probably know, is famous for having a lot of firms. Cecilia, if I'm wrong, more than 4 million, a lot of firms. And most of these firms are very, very, very small. I don't remember exactly, but I would say 95% of them have less than 10 employees, something like that. And the average size as a result is 4, while in Germany, for example, is 13. Why is this bad? I mean, we know, historians will tell us, that there is a lot of flexibility, the industrial districts and so on. What we know today is that this is bad for R&D, this is bad for financing R&D, this is bad for innovation in general, this is bad for the absorbing capacity of the firms, this is bad for productivity dynamics, which I'm more interested in than any other variable. We just make a simple exercise here. What about if you plug on the Italian system the firm size distribution of Germany? What happens to the gap between Italy and Germany in terms of share of innovative firms? This gap narrows by 30%. If we do the same with the sectoral specialization, the gap narrows by 10%. What is saying that? What is this saying to us? In my view, is saying that let's forget for a second about textile versus automobiles. The sectoral specialization of the country. This is saying that Italy has a problem within each sector. Within each sector, we find a structure that is, worse in a sense for the innovative capacity. So, but firm size, as somebody said, it's something. Is it endogenous variable? Firms choose their size. So, as a policymaker, if I tell you, the problem is firm size, what are you going to do? I don't know. I have to understand why the size is low. I don't have an answer to that. I just give you a flavor that I find interesting, which is the one that you said before, right? The governance and the management of the family, of the Italian firms. In the first column, this is just a manufacturing firm with more than 10 employees. So, a great part of the Italian system is outside this, probably not in the manufacturing. But then you see in the first column the percentage of firms that are family owned. This is a kind of standard feature of many countries. Many firms are more from an individual. Maybe the individual brings his son, his wife, his husband within the firm, so this is a family firm. This is true in Italy, it's true even in the UK. Okay? But when you move and look at the management of these firms, you see in the last column, the second column is when the CEO is from the family. And here you see that Germany and Italy are, again, with a lot of family firms that are family managed by the CEO. The CEO is from the family. In the last column, where Italy is really peculiar, is when all the management is from the same family. All the management, And as you can see, by simple correlation, I'm not telling anything that is causal, by simple correlation, we see that these family managed firms are less likely to invest in R&D, are less likely to introduce product process innovation. I leave to the floor the reason for this, but there could be many reasons related to the fact that if you choose within the family, very likely you're going to choose a manager that is on average worse than if you can choose in a larger set, or there is something that is related to the attitude of the firm, and in particular to the risk aversion. If you want to close within the family, probably part of the attitude, the risk aversion that we all apply in our family when we manage the finance of the family goes to the firm too, and so in that sense, it's not too strange to see lower innovation. This structure of the Italian firm is strongly related to the financial structure and therefore to the financing of innovation. Innovation is hard to finance, we all know, risky activity, asymmetric information, uncertainty. As a matter of fact, most of the innovation is financed through cash flow by firms. The problem with cash flow is that cash flow is cyclical. When there is a crisis, you have less liquidity, and therefore you cannot invest in innovation. And also, cash flow is not in the hand of the new entrepreneurs. So this is why innovative firms that need external resources go to equity, and there are the good property of equities that have been already recalled by somebody during the day. What happens in Italy is that we find, as in other countries, that equity increases innovation. And but in Italy, as you probably know, if you don't know, I'll tell you, the financial structure of firm is peculiar. There's a lot of bad debt and very little equity. And obviously, this, if you combine with the management, family management structure, there is on one side, the side of the family that's not putting too much capital into the firm, but at the same time of not accepting external capital, because obviously, if somebody puts external capital into the firm, probably wants to manage at some point the firm. So there is this, this closure of the firm. Then we all know that as a result, obviously here it's difficult to distinguish demand from supply factor. I mean, if the firms are closed, they don't demand venture capital or other help from external individuals, but at the same time, we know that this industry, the industry that are dedicated to innovation by new firms, in Italy are not developed. I guess that again, I don't remember who showed the graph, a graph that more or less is like this. So now this is a very quick picture of the Italian economy. So let's go, given all this, what an entrepreneurial state can do. So this is the question I want to leave on the floor. And I think that there are many things that an entrepreneurial state can do, given the situation, which is probably a peculiar situation in Italy, but on many dimensions, Europe share some of these features, probably South Europe, but also other countries. Here, just give me, this is a concept that has apparently little to do with innovation, but is really important for economists, and is related to the mobility that we were talking about in the Silicon Valley example. So for an economist, the important driver of growth is this allocative efficiency. What is allocative efficiency? Is the ability of a system to move resources from less efficient to more efficient uses, from less efficient firms to more efficient firms, from less innovative firms to more innovative firms. What are the resources? Resources are capital, again, and labor, for example, all the inputs. If you have a firm that is not a good firm, the firm must close business, and you have to move swiftly, labor and capital to another firm. This is the basic idea. This is a driver of growth. I don't tell you how this measure is built, trust me, but if you take this measure and you see how the countries are ranked, you see on the right side, United States, Finland, Sweden with with a good allocative efficiency. Italy is down there. So this has to do with innovation. Even if most of the economic literature is focusing on productivity, there are a couple of interesting papers by the OECD that looks at the ability, as I was saying before, of an economy to move resources toward the high growth, high innovative firms. So Italy in this is lagging behind. So let's take this concept as a guide for a future for the discussion. And so what are the determinants of this allocative efficiency? Again, this is from an OECD paper. This is saying, there is a negative relationship correlation. This is just correlation, nothing fancy or causal impact on a variable on the other, just a correlation. But there are regulation issues like product market regulation, competition, bankruptcy related to the exit of firms from the market. EPL is employment protection regulation, so this is labor market regulation. Banking regulation, so competitiveness, competition in the banking sector and so on. They are all negatively related to allocative efficiency. So let's take this as a starting point and let's go into the detail of the Italian economy and try to see whether there are some aspects where the role of the government as an entrepreneur important. There are a couple of papers that a colleague of mine have done in this project on labor market regulation. There is for example, there is a debate, I think it's very interesting, on the flexibility. We like flexibility in the labor market, we don't like flexibility in the labor market. What can we say in terms of innovation? There are two opposite arguments. On one side, you might say, okay, innovative firms need flexibility. They have to try a new project, the project fails, they have to be able to get rid of the worker easily. So you don't want to have a lot of rigid exit procedure. But on the other side, if there is too much flexibility, both the worker and the firm have a little interest in investing in firm-specific human capital, in the things that the firm is investing in. The firm has no incentive to give any training to the worker because the firm knows that probably the worker will leave, and the same story happened on the worker side. From an empirical analysis, we find that this second effect is more important than the first one. Just to give you a flavor of what we can do when we start thinking in terms of the single regulation. Let me skip the apprenticeship contract. Let's go to the human capital. Supply or demand?
This is the big question. So it's a matter of the quality and quantity of education system, school and university, or is it a matter of the firm that do not demand skill, and therefore if they don't demand skill, people have no incentive to go to school or to university, or if they have incentive, they get a very low returns to education. Is it all the old story, or there is something else? So another paper saying takes the most before main European countries, and in a dynamic model which is complicated with a lot of hypotheses, put the supply side, the demand side, and put something that is in between, which is the mismatch. I mean, in a labor market, there are many things, many parts of the labor market regulation that affect the ability of the market to match the right worker in the right firm. There is a discussion. So this is part of this match. According to this paper, this mismatch part, together with the supply side, and therefore the quality of education systems, are the two elements that explain the gap between Italy and the other countries in terms of innovation. Then taxation. I told you before, redundant firms like that and not equity, I think is a cultural thing, but obviously if you put on that also wedge in terms of taxation, if you give a fiscal incentives in terms of that, then you are reinforcing a mechanism that is cultural. So what has been done by this government, I guess, was the allowance for corporate equity, which was exactly fiscal disincentive, a fiscal incentive to equity. Basically, the gap between debt and equity cost of capital has reduced, has now. So this is something else that the government, with the taxation system, can do to favor innovation. Then there is the part that Mariano Mazzucato criticized very strongly, and I would say, in the case of Italy, I which is the free incentives and all this stuff. Here you see some exercises of policy evaluation on some Italian instruments, the Fund for Technological Innovation, and two examples of people in Emilia-Romagna. And you see that either you find no effect, or you find small effect for some firms, typically small firms which are credit constrained, which makes sense. Because if they are credit constrained, if they get public support, they can do innovation. Obviously, there are many caveats behind this work in terms of data and empirical strategies. Same exercise we did with technological districts and science park, and finding very weak, basically nothing. Basically, these kind of experiments in Italy didn't work as expected. These experiments these policies were able to attract within the district or within the park the best firms, but then the performance of these firms didn't improve rather more than the performance of similar firms. So these are examples of failure of a non-entrepreneurial state. So just to conclude, hopefully I give you some food for thought. Obviously, I cannot claim that the entrepreneurial state and the non-entrepreneurial state are two alternative models. They are complementary. I would say that centering too much on the entrepreneurial state model is missing something. I hope I convinced you on that. Then let me conclude with 2 points I think that are useful for the discussion. And the first one is country specificities are important. Obviously, Italy is an example, probably is not the best example in terms of innovation. But I would also say that upgrading all our current states, European or worldwide states, to become an entrepreneurial state, I think is very difficult and too costly, especially when there are public finance problems, like in this case. Obviously, I'm not saying to cut finance to public research and so on. I'm just saying that to jump from an entrepreneur to an entrepreneurial state is very costly. And the second point is kind of trivial, but somebody mentioned that in the morning, why talking about entrepreneurial state at Italian, French, or Spanish level? It doesn't make any sense. We are Europe. So if you want to talk about an entrepreneurial state, let's talk about EU level entrepreneurial state. Okay, I'm done.
So we have a break? Yeah, first is the entire community roundtable.
Volevo portare a casa.
No, adesso invece la tavola rotonda, adesso magari durante la tavola rotonda raccogliamo, così prendo il computer, aggiorno il sistema. Oh, guarda, tengo qua. Ok. Dobbiamo caricarla sull'altro computer, se non è un problema, aspettiamo appena quando c'è la tavola rotonda. Ci fate così, porto via il computer da lì e tranquillo, farlo funzionare. Oh, è stato good morning. Good afternoon. We have to upload your presentation. As you want, we can talk the break because I have to upgrade the effort. Okay. When you see the input, you can get there.